Good morning, folks. Welcome back to the Digital Weather Center. I'm News 6 meteorologist David Nazario with quite an abundance to talk about. Today, we're going to hit the ground running and get right into it. And I want to say a good morning to folks tuning in over on our News 6 YouTube channel. Buckle up, fasten your seatbelts, and hold on to your butts because I have some up and coming information that I want to get across to you right now. With that being said, let's go ahead and set the stage first and foremost. We have a lot that's happening on our water vapor satellite shut, and I'll take us in for a closer view together so we can doodle around a little bit. You know, one of my favorite things to do whenever we get into these live streams. So, right out of the gate, notice we have a couple of different spins out there across the board. We have one here, we have one there, we have one here, we have one up here. We have a lot going on in the pattern. We also have a very raggedy looking jet stream, some jet activity possibly in through here, another little bit of a jet streak there, a little bit of a jet streak here, more jet stream energy screaming through the mid-Atlantic coastline, and then we also have remnants of our subtropical jet, despite the La Nina influence, still ripping across the deep south over our neck of the woods here in central Florida. And the reason I highlight this is we're going to have a very, very dynamic pattern set up as we go over the next 5 to 7 days. And a lot of what could possibly happen next week hinges on that very setup, how it comes together. And that's exactly what we're going to be tracking over the next couple of days, tuning in here in the News 6 digital department, tracking exactly what happens step by step, day by day. I'm sure you're all very well aware of this. These are our latest outlooks from Climate Prediction Center, the temperature outlook, and look at how dark those blue shades are. Now, granted, you can see there's a bit of a color code plaid there, kind of a step down, or I should say step up in expected temperatures here in central Florida, but the key takeaway here that plays a role in our weather in central Florida does involve this dramatic change and drop in our surface temperatures. Climate Prediction Center thinks we will be below average, incredibly below average, for at least another 2 to 3 weeks over much of the lower 48. And as a result of that, that could really be enhancing to what type of phenomena we see across the Florida Peninsula and through the Gulf Coast. Some of our model data is coming in right now, and it looks kind of spectacular, to tell you the truth. We'll get right into that. So here is a look at our zoomed in 12Z GFS. This is the latest from our American model. We will get the European model later on this afternoon in about another hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, pending which website you use. And I will definitely be looking carefully at that. I would also encourage, if you have the means of doing so, check us out on Instagram. Check me out on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, over on Weather Center _Nazario, the Just Weather YouTube channel, where meteorologist Jonathan Kagas and I will be unrolling content regarding this setup and the potential scenarios we see on the table here. But we'll go ahead and we'll kind of skip over all the speak talk and the self-promotion here. Let's take a look. So this is during the week. Obviously, we're looking at a very cloudy and somewhat dreary middle portion, latter portion of the week, thanks to some influence of energy down there in the western Gulf of Mexico. The Gulf of Mexico waters are still fairly hot as well. That's the interesting part. And when I say hot, I don't mean that in terms of we can fuel tropical cyclones. I say that in the terms of it is anomalously warm given the point in the year that we are and the amount of cold plunges we've had come down through the Great Plains down into the Gulf of Mexico. We are still sitting somewhere between 65 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit with a loop current that lights up like a 4th of July firework or a New Year's Eve firework when you look at the SST anomalies down there in that general area. And the reason I bring that up, coupled with the warm waters still perched off the southeast coast of the Carolinas, Georgia, our Florida east coast, the Gulf Stream is what I'm talking about here, this influences what could happen. Warm water, believe it or not, plays more of a role in the weather we observe outside of just strictly talking hurricanes and tropical cyclones, intensification, etc. And I'll walk you through that here in a moment. This is Thursday at 8 p.m. Let's go through the weekend. This is when things start to get a little interesting. Notice that trademark return flow out of the Gulf of Mexico has begun. Looking at these very, very subtle shades of red, these minute red arrows coming straight out of the western and central Gulf of Mexico. A little bit of a high pressure rotating off our east coast there, driving those counterclockwise or those clockwise winds, driving energy, moisture, and instability up into a very infamous spot, the Great Plains. And as you can see, we take the loop a little further in time. Here comes our next potential winter system. Now, the models have been very finicky with this. I've been doing a lot of dissecting and a lot of deep diving on these scenarios behind the scenes, out of the Weather Center, over at home, and for my social media updates when I can't be here talking to you lovely viewers in our digital Weather Center. I do still think there is a shot at some very isolated thunderstorm activity. I do think we have the potential for some localized heavy rainfall with this setup, given how much warm air we have surging out of the Gulf of Mexico. This is your entire warm sector right there. That's where your warm air is. I'll go ahead and put warm, moist air, WMA, right there. And then we have our cool, dry air, our CDA, on the back side of it. We're just making up acronyms, folks, by the way. This is not legitimate meteorological jargon. I'm just making this up so we can roll with the punches together. We have our CDA back behind the front and our WMA, the warm, moist air, ahead of it. And this is your battle zone. You can see the models are picking up on that line and that slew of heavier rainfall and maybe some embedded thunderstorms and lightning strikes associated with that front as it comes down. And the reason I bring that up is we will stay fairly cool down here in the southeast, but given the fact we have such frigid temperatures coming down, that gradient is going to likely be remarkable regardless. And typically you want warmer air out ahead of a front that packs a punch. And in this case, despite it being relatively warmer air, 60, 70 degrees, I'll show you the temperatures here in a moment, I do still think we have the chance at seeing a lot of this rainfall try to stack up on itself, especially as it moves into central Florida there, you can see. And this is where it starts to get interesting. Let me go ahead and delete my ink out of the way so you can see a little bit better. And I'll take us full screen so you can get a better representation of what's happening down there. And I'll even zoom us down in on Florida and the Gulf of Mexico. So this is Sunday morning. The front starts to get stuck. Notice how it continues towards the southeast, but we're already starting to see a bit of a change in the wind direction over the western Gulf of Mexico. See how the winds over Florida are out of the north, and then up near Myrtle Beach, the Carolinas, we're out of the north-northwest. But then see how we're already starting to see a shift in the winds in the southeastern or the southwestern corner of the Gulf of Mexico. They're flowing like this. They're coming in out of the east almost, which is going to tell me that there is the potential for a bit of a tail front or the tail end of a front down there to possibly try to do something. So there goes the first system. I'll take you through time. And then now we're looking way long range, but this has been trending. Watch closely what happens in the western Gulf of Mexico. Look at that. Big old storm system. And this is the latest model data that I have for you all. And now, typically, I don't like to look this far out. There will be some dramatic adjustments still. I could be briefing you all this today, and then later this afternoon, once we get our 18 Zulu model data in around 4 or 5 o'clock, gone. However, we usually take careful strides in how we unpack this information based on model consistency. And I have my screen sharing up behind this that I'll pull up here towards the back end of this discussion to show you the level of consistency that we've seen over the last several days, highlighting the potential threats that are coming our way. Heavier rainfall, and then a lot of this wintry havoc for the southeast because of the characteristics and the environment we will have in place. Before you can see, it continues to rocket up the east coast, building another area of low pressure just off of the Carolina coastline. Now, here's a look at your wind speeds. The winds are what's going to be the driving force behind this, not only with the front before it comes through, but then shortly thereafter. We'll take you through. You can see that return flow begins to get started down there in the Gulf of Mexico, right about there. Winds completely open up out of the south, and then we begin to see that corridor, very gusty conditions for the central southern plains, Dixie Alley, and that continues to accelerate as that system moves off towards, look at that, towards the east. In-house model predicting 46-mile-an-hour gusts for Pensacola. That's what I'm saying. Even though we're slightly cool and clouded over here in Florida and up the peninsula and into the southeast, like Georgia, Alabama, etc., the fact that we have such dense air, we're talking just physically dense air. We're not talking data, temperatures, dew points, humidity, etc. We're just saying literally dense. Like, say, for instance, if I try to slap you with an open hand, yeah, sure, that's going to hurt. But if I close a fist tightly and try to go give you a right hook to the chin, that's going to be a lot more detrimental. And I promise I'm not saying that, I'm a big boxing fan. So don't take that in a negative connotation. I promise. It's nothing directed towards you guys. You guys are awesome. So nothing in that sense. It's just trying to give you a physical idea of the differences between, the air that we're used to here in Florida. That would be like a slap, like a little slap across the face. Then we have our polar air, which is a little bit tighter wrapped, a little bit denser. That's like kind of like a minimally closed fist, and you kind of give a slapping punch. And then you have Mike Tyson, prime Mike Tyson. We're talking 18-year-old Mike Tyson with a closed, tightly wound up fist, giving you an uppercut to the chin. That's going to take you out and lay you on the canvas. And that's kind of the differences that we have in play here, which is why the model is showing tropical storm force conditions are potentially going to occur for our friends in the Panhandle. And that continues to translate through. If you look, even in Central Florida, gusting into the 30, 35 mile an hour range by Saturday night with that front coming down, and then up the eastern seaboard, we have those stronger gusts occurring as that system continues to unfold. And then we move on into early next week, and we start to see that next system build in. And this is where things could get very interesting. Look at that. Tropical storm potential conditions for Jacksonville, Pensacola, once again, New Orleans. If you have friends or family out there in New Orleans, Louisiana boot, seeing some strong winds with this system. And that will also continue to translate over into Central Florida. Look at that. Again, gusting anywhere between 30, 35 miles an hour. The Carolinas getting in on some gratuitous onshore flow as that next potential system unravels and begins to develop. And the reason I say we got to watch this very closely is the parameters and the pieces will be there. Let's go ahead and shift on over to our temperature anomaly. And this is where I'll use this as kind of a discussion in an educational tool to back up what it is that I'm talking about. So you can see we have the cold air in place. We get a little bit of a warm up before the big plunge. And then here comes that massive outbreak. Look at all those below average anomalies, extreme below average anomalies. The entire United States minus maybe about, we'll say, what is that, 5, 6 states, if you want to exclude Idaho and Utah from those dark shades of purple and pink. Those are incredibly below average temperatures. We're talking anywhere between -10, -20 below zero, extending all the way down through the southern plains. And now, what does this have to do with an area of low pressure? So I'll go ahead and bring us full screen again. As we all know, tropical cyclones, for example, they love warm water. They feed off of warm water. They're like NASCAR internal combustion engines just eating fuel from the warm waters below their center of circulation. Well, in this case, for these winter type systems, typically they form in the mid-latitudes. That's why they're called mid-latitude cyclones, as opposed to tropical cyclones we typically see coming out of the east headed west. These systems will typically propagate west to east with the jet stream right along the polar front jet. And most of the time, we don't have things like wintry weather, blizzards, winter storms occurring during, say, the summer, because the jet is calm, the jet is quiet. The jet stays mainly to the north, going west to east most of the time. When you have such extreme troughs down to the south like this, you take those very cold temperatures and you put them over very warm water. That's what creates instability. And the reason I want us to watch not only the first system, but especially that second area of low pressure that could try to form up in the Gulf of Mexico is, again, going back to what I'd mentioned previously, the Gulf of Mexico waters are abnormally hot. I'll go ahead and pull that up front and center so you can see what I'm talking about here. Let's go to the anomalies in the Western Atlantic. Let me get that pulled up front and center and switch us over to my screen share. See that? If you looked at this map, you would honestly, without context, believe, good Lord, are we still in hurricane season? You can see the shelf waters around Florida because of the cold fronts have really cooled us down, which is good news. But look at the Caribbean and especially the Gulf of Mexico with those warm blobs, those anomalies that are anywhere between 1.5 to even 2.5 degrees Celsius warmer than what they should be this time of year. And that will definitely pay in dividends when it comes to winter storm forecasting and severe weather forecasting as we get into transition season, which is the period of time as we get to the tail end of winter into spring. So now let's go back over to our little temperature anomaly chart. So if we have those very warm waters beneath extremely cold temperatures, we're talking Arctic temps over warm water, that gets the atmosphere unstable. It gets the mechanisms of spin to begin. And that's why, if you notice, the model very quickly starts to transition us to a bit of a winter onslaught down across the south. Let me take you back over to the Tropical Tidbits page so we can just mouse through it. First and foremost, let me go ahead and see. I don't have EpicPen on this desktop. I'm sorry. I'm going to go ahead and use my cursor here. So follow my cursor. There's a blue line right here, a 540 thickness line. That is usually your rain snow delineation. Your 540 thickness line is where your freezing level usually sits. So to the south of that, as just a general rule of thumb, to the south of the 540 line, you'll usually get rain. Maybe a cold rain, maybe a bit of a warm rain, pending the time of year. And then to the north of that 540 line is where you start to get into your wintry precip, sleet, freezing rain. And then even further from there, well into that 540 line is when you transition to bona fide snowfall. If I go forward in time just a little bit, see how that 540 line continues to get tugged through Texas. And then we have lots of temperature discontinuity, a gradient between warmer temperatures and colder temperatures. It's very tight over the Gulf of Mexico. Our tropical air would be right in through here near the Florida Straits, the southern Gulf of Mexico. And our polar to Arctic air is right here over the Gulf coastline. That is a very tight gradient. And as you all know, gradient simply means change over a distance. If you have, we'll say, I'm standing here, and then you're standing here, that would be the gradient between us, the distance between the two. And when I say things like gradient, if you think about it in three-dimensionally, if you have a thickness line of X here versus Y here, there's your gradient. Rapid transition from a taller thing to a shorter thing. And that's also what creates instability. And that's why our latest run of the GFS, bam, goes bonkers. And this has been trending too. I'll go back to 6Z. There it is. Pretty much same exact thing. Go back to 0Z. There it is. You go to 18Z. There it is. You go to 12Z. There it is. You go to 6Z. There it is. You go to 0Z yesterday. There it is. You go all the way back to 12Z on Saturday, and there it is. You can still see it. So our models have been very, very consistent. In fact, I'll pull up a couple of other models. Let's see. The Canadian model for today is in now. Let's take a look if it also has it. There it is. Yeah, look at that. A little bit on the lesser side, a smaller, more compact system, but nonetheless, it's still down there. You take a look at the German model, doesn't go quite as far out, but you can see the beginnings of that storm system beginning to take shape right along that gradient in the western Gulf of Mexico. Our Euro AI model also has an enormous blip of precipitation down there. Now, granted, this model does not have the ice, snow, sleet, etc. gradient or legend on it. It's only just the moisture. So that's why you only see the shades of green down here. This model has also been trending towards that solution for Central Florida, as well as a bit more of a robust first system you can see right there for this weekend. This is Saturday morning into Sunday morning, right there, coming across the southeast and then up the mid-Atlantic coastline. The European model itself has been a bit finicky with this setup. You can see the first one coming in a bit on the stronger side, especially for our neighbors to our northwest through Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama. Before we quickly transition, we get that nose of cold air down into the Gulf of Mexico, through Texas and into Mexico, and there it is. It begins to develop, but doesn't quite get as feisty. It kind of falls apart during its trek over the Gulf of Mexico. which, is still a very viable solution, especially looking around 180 to 200 hours out. We're not quite outside of the realm of possibility, but we're not quite close enough to where we can confidently almost lock this forecast in and throw away the key. So I would highly, highly, highly encourage, if you are watching this morning, share this information, share this live stream, spread it by word of mouth, even if you'd like, and check back with us as we go through the rest of the week. I will be hosting these 11:30 live streams today through to Friday because I am back and the schedule is finally ironing itself out. And you can also get periodic updates over on our News 6 TikTok, News 6 Instagram, as well as my own personal social medias. Weather Center _ Nazario is the username across all platforms. You name it, I probably have it. I even opened up a new Threads account as well to start populating information and updates there as we get ready for what this could possibly be. So with that being said, that is just about all I got for you guys today. We're not streaming on News 6 Plus today because it looks like they have some stuff going on over there, at least for now. So that's why we're here just specifically on the YouTube channel. If there's anyone in the chat, do we have any questions? I do see earlier that Kevin Hawthorne said good morning from Lakeland, a neighbor of mine technically since I'm over in Haines City. And then we have Awakened One. What is going on with our weather? This is crazy. I do completely agree with you on that for sure. And as you can see, we're tracking some potentially even crazier solutions as we go down the road. Now, obviously, this isn't going to be incredibly impactful for us. It looks like if this were to unfold as some of our current model solutions predict, it could be a lot more eventful for our folks to the north and maybe into the panhandle of Florida. Central Florida will get a lot of rainfall, though, because of the fact that we have a frontal boundary that's going to make its way through, kind of retrograde back into the Florida Peninsula, driving a lot of that moisture out of the southwest towards the northeast before finally pulling that frontal system in with help of the jet stream up at the highest points of the atmosphere. So I'll give it a second over on YouTube. If anyone has any questions in the chat, feel free to drop them in before we close out. I'm actually going to probably hop off the screen once we wrap up and get ready to start building products and graphics for our social media updates that I'll be posting. So this way you can come and check back. You don't have to worry about a long-winded spiel like we did here on YouTube for almost 30 minutes. I'll try to consolidate it to about 2 to 3 minutes. As you can see, I talk a lot. So no promises given there in that regard. All right, it doesn't look like we have any questions. Awakened One, if you're still in the chat, I hope I answered your question to the best of my ability. And definitely consider clicking subscribe, liking this info, sharing this information if you'd like across the social media platforms. And we will definitely see you again tomorrow. But until then, you know the drill. This is the Digital Weather Center signing out.